Hello and welcome to the Southampton University Key Concepts for A Level Philosophy series. In these videos, philosophers from the University of Southampton explain some of the key concepts for the AQA Philosophy A Level. My name is Fiona Woollard, and today I'll be looking at the concepts of utility and the utility calculus. So we're going to start by introducing an important figure in this area, Jeremy Bentham. Jeremy Bentham was a famous utilitarian philosopher who lived in the 18th and 19th century. He wrote the Introduction to the Principles of Morals and Legislation. It's that book from which we'll be drawing our understanding of the concept of utility. It's also in that book that Bentham put forward his utility calculus. Interesting fact about Bentham, he requested that his body be preserved and displayed after his death. You can go and see him in a cabinet in the University College London. So let's begin by looking at what utility is. What did Bentham say about utility? Bentham famously said, "By utility is meant that property in any object whereby it tends to produce benefit, advantage, pleasure, good or happiness." All this in the present case comes to the same thing. Or, what comes again to the same thing, to prevent the happening of mischief, pain, evil or unhappiness to the party whose interest is considered. If that party be the community in general, then the happiness of the community. If a particular individual, then the happiness of that individual. So what does this mean? It means that utility means usefulness. But usefulness for what? Usefulness for human well-being, benefit, advantage, good or happiness. An object or action's utility is how useful it is for making humans better off. Sometimes people use utility just to mean human well-being. A utilitarian moral theory focuses on increasing happiness or well-being. Let's now turn to the utility calculus. Bentham's utility calculus was designed to measure the value of pleasure or pain that an action is likely to cause. We use 7 circumstances in our calculation. The first 4 tell us the value of a given pleasure or pain in itself. The next 2 tell us about the other effects of the act. And finally, we take into account the number of people affected. We use these 7 circumstances to calculate the value of the action for each person involved. And then we sum up the values of the pleasures on one side and the values of the pains on the other. The overall value is the total value of the pleasures minus the total value of the pain. So how do we calculate the value of a pleasure in itself? Bentham thought that we had to take into account 4 different things. Its intensity. How intense is it? How strong is the pleasure? Its duration. How long will it last? Its certainty or uncertainty. Can we be sure it's going to happen and that it's going to feel good? Its propinquity or remoteness. Is it close or is it a long way off? The other circumstances that Bentham says we also need to take into account are how the pleasure or pain relates to other pleasures and pains and how many people are affected. So Bentham used the terms fecundity and purity here. So fecundity is when a pleasure gives rise to more pleasure or a pain leads to more pain. And purity is the absence of the opposite type of sensation. So a pleasure is pure when you don't have any pains that follow from it. and a pain is pure if it's not lightened by accompanying pleasures. We also need to take into account the extent of the pleasure, so how many people are affected. And as I said, we use these 7 circumstances to calculate the value of the action for each person involved, and then we sum up the value of the pleasures on one side, value of pains on the other, and the overall value is the total value of the pleasures minus the total value of the pain. So to sum up, an object or action's utility is how useful it is for making humans better off. Sometimes people use utility just to mean happiness or well-being. Bentham's utility calculus is a way to calculate the value of the pleasure and pain an action is likely to cause. We do this by considering intensity, duration, certainty, and propinquity or nearness of each pleasure or pain, their fecundity and purity, whether they're going to lead to further pleasures and pains, for each person affected. Then we consider the extent, how many people are affected, and the overall value is the total value of the pleasures minus the total value of the pain. Thank you very much for listening to this video on utility and the utility calculus. To find out more, you can follow us on Twitter, @SouthamptonPhilosophy, or you can go to southampton.ac.uk/philosophy. Thanks.